What a beautiful group of TEDxers we have here. My name's Amber Lupton. Thank you, Alex.
And I'm Nathan Otto, and we're going to talk today about the emerging cooperative paradigm that we're shifting into from the old competitive paradigm. And have most of you noticed that we're in a global transition, I hope? Like, times are a little different, things are changing? Great. We're going to be talking about that transition in the context of evolution and the old competitive paradigm and the new cooperative paradigm.
The late artist and enlightened being Adidas Samraj, he spoke about this new cooperative paradigm. He said something new is coming. He said we need a new mode of social contract, an egoless mode of social contract, one based on cooperation, tolerance, and the principle of universal participation and accountability. I think that relates a bit to what Sam was talking about of freedom. It's a different way to participate. Einstein said we can't solve our problems on the same level of energy in which they were created. And I see this relates to the current global issues that we're faced with. Challenges like the environment, women's rights, disease. These can't be solved as isolated issues, separate somehow from the way we evolve, how we handle conflict. When we learn to go even one step towards cooperation, we begin to find new allies and friends who've been helping us all along and we didn't even know this. Cooperation helps you to align your personal, business, and larger contributions to the world.
I'd like to refine your idea of what evolution is to contextualize what we're saying. Your high school teacher probably told you evolution is the adaptation of form over time in response to the forces of reproduction, survival, and the environment. Well, let's take that a little bit further and look at it in who we are as humans. If you think about what happens first in evolution, first there's some change in behavior, and then the form follows that function. So if a bird's trying to get a bug in a little hole, then if he keeps trying to do that, then the birds with longer beaks will survive better because they get more bugs, and then in a few generations you'll have a bird with a longer beak because of the behavior change. So something happened to us on the way to evolution where we evolved evolution itself. We evolved to become general purpose animals where our adaptations of form take place in the tools and the cultural adaptations and the clothing and so on that we use. And we started doing something I call fast evolution. Fast evolution is where that same process of evolution takes place within a human lifetime, within an hour, within a very short amount of time. We tend to call it learning, but it's really patterns of neural nets that are passed on from generation to generation that make us more and more effective in the world. So we have fast evolution. Animals and that general genre of things that aren't humans evolve slowly, and we evolve fast. So their limitation is the environment and their unconscious motivations, and our limitation until now has been the environment and unconscious motivations. So that's no longer going to work. We need to consciously evolve if we're going to survive this transition that we're in. We need to evolve away from the competitive paradigm of fighting for the unconscious motivations of reproduction, survival, comfort, mates, and unfettered reproduction, and move into a conscious cooperative paradigm. And that's important in our field of conflict transformation because how we handle group conflict globally is one of the key points of how we can consciously evolve. And that's the field in which Amber and I work.
The old competitive paradigm gave us the era of the great powers. And that gave us our current peace field, which currently is systematized with an institution of exclusion and privilege. There's a very big gap between those in the know and those not in the know. Media is strategically manipulated to keep accurate, actionable knowledge out of the hands of you and me, ordinary individuals. Most of the people in the know are either a few peace builders on the ground, we know some of them personally, some military personnel, and old men in stuffy rooms. One way that this directly affects women, the United Nations reported in our most modern warfare, 90% of people wounded and killed are civilians. And right there on the United Nations homepage, it says primarily women and children. And yet, if we peek behind the doors of the policymaking rooms that affect these war zones, and we look at the formal peacemaking processes, 90% of them have 0 women in them. So there's a very big gap between those making the decisions and in the know, and those actually affected in war zones. Currently, today, average from the Western world all the way to third world countries, it's only 8% of women involved in a formal peacemaking process. And on all peace treaties signed, there's just 3% of women that are signatories. We call this our current peace apartheid system. And we're seeing it break down in recent events like the Egyptian Revolution, where people with different organizations, ordinary individuals, cooperate together to start breaking down the Berlin Wall of peace and say, we're taking our power back as individuals. We're not outsourcing it to the government or the military or the UN that's set up to solve that problem for us. So it's easy for us to begin to point the finger out there at the peace apartheid system. But I want to take a moment to point the finger in at each of our inner peace apartheid. There's a model from philosopher Ken Wilber, who I've had a personal relationship with. It's called the Aqwal Model. And you'll see there's an inside and an outside on this model.
And there's an individual and a collective. And most people naturally locate themselves somewhere inside of this model. So in the peace world, if you're naturally on the interior upper left, then you'll think that we can't have peace until we all have inner peace. And if you're on the exterior side, you'll think we can't have peace until we stop those bad individuals from doing what they're doing. And if you're on the lower left, you're in a more of a cultural model. We have to practice a culture of peace so that we all together feel peace in our hearts. And then if you're on the lower right, you're a systematizer. And you think, well, none of that matters unless we have systems that systematically support peace and everybody can participate in that.
So think about where you are most comfortable on this model. Are you most comfortable with systems? Do you think that the inner world is more important? Who are the people that you'd rather not listen to? We're all, generally there's 1 or 2 a percentage that maybe you cover, but then, there's at least one section that maybe they just couldn't get as much airtime. So consider, where would you like to build a little Berlin Wall around one of those quadrants? Maybe if you're into inner peace, why are people talking about just systems? That's so inhuman. Or if you're really a culturalist, why do we need to speak about justice and forgiveness? Like, is that really fair? We each have our sort of prison camp that we'd like to put people in.
You can imagine these lines having barbed wire on them, and that would be fairly accurate.
You may not torture the people in your prison camp, but they definitely have to do hard labor to get you to listen to them. I have my own that I get to look at. Because cooperation does not always feel peaceful. Cooperation is oftentimes agitating. And the first step to personally expand your capacity for cooperation is to expand your capacity to be with tension in yourself. So notice the next time someone has a different perspective on something you're passionate about, but you really don't agree with their approach. Take one breath. See if you can give them 2 more sentences to express what they're saying. Listen for if maybe their approach might work at some point, or at least help you in your goals. That's the first step personally. Now, on a larger domain, this room is filled with passionate, brilliant people with great goals. Think about one of the goals you're passionate about. The next step is consider who else has that same goal. Who's approaching that same goal from a different field, or maybe from a different domain? Or consider if you accomplish that goal that you're passionate about, who would you help? So begin to put together this larger picture that you think you're working on alone. And third, and this is the hardest step, is go find these other people from these different fields with these different approaches. Sit down with them, listen, and discover what is the larger goal that both of your goals fit inside of. What's the larger commitment that both of your commitments fit inside of? Nathan and I put on these summits, and we noticed it goes through about 3 different stages.
Well, let me paint a picture of what these summits are like, because they're cross-sector summits where we get people from business, from media, from the peacemaking field, from the military, people of high accomplishment who get paid a lot of money to have strong opinions.
Even some people in this room have been at these summits.
We recently gathered 30 of these people at a retreat in upstate New York and put them all in a room, and you can imagine what it's like to put all of these people from different sectors who speak different languages, who all have big accomplishments, in a room.
So imagine the first day. We all have really big egos and really big projects, and mine is definitely the best. So's Nathan's.
Mine's the best.
So's yours. Everyone knows you have got the best idea. But we've got to listen to each other. You know, what are other people doing? Some people, I really want to hear what they have to say. And then there's a couple that I wish they would just stop talking sooner. And we each all have, a few of those people. But something happens the second day of these summits. A breakthrough moment happens where we begin to see the value that each person in the room is bringing, the value of their project. And somehow the larger commitment that we're inside of begins to be seen and known. But the real magic happens on the third day. It's when there's enough trust built up in the room where we begin to build a machine together that's going to accomplish all of our goals, all of our projects, in a way that's more effective, has more ease, and definitely is more fun than any of us had thought of beforehand or would think of as individuals before these summits.
And that cooperative act of putting our projects inside a greater context is the magic of the new cooperative paradigm. Any paradigm that's going to replace an old paradigm has to be at least 10 times better than that old paradigm. And that moment of magic proves in that inner quadrant, and that is definitely, you get that feeling in your body, this is definitely 10 times better. But we can look at some exterior measurable statistics that indicate the value of transitioning how we handle our global affairs to a cooperative model. For instance, that study by the Oxford Research Group.
They pointed out that for $1 spent on cooperative peace-building efforts is equal to $60 on the program costs once violence has erupted. So cooperative peace-building is 60 times more cost-effective than responding to violent conflict after it's erupted.
But look at the balance of how we spend our security dollar. The money that we spend on cooperative peace-building or on other security measures is all pretty much spent for the same thing. But in the OECD countries, the developed world, for every $1 that we spend on cooperative peace-building, we spend $1,885 on weapons procurement and military operations.
Globally, we spend about $1.46 trillion on military expenditures. That is $217 for every human being on the planet, man, woman, and child. Now, here in Sin City, $217 isn't that much money. But for people living on less than $1 a day, it makes a very big difference.
The entire budget of the UN is less than 2% of global military expenditures. The UN is supposed to be the premier peacemaking institution on the planet. That's not a great allocation, I think, of security and safety dollars. But what if we had world peace, so to speak? What if we reduced violence to a minimal level? What would the economic benefit be? The institution, what's called Institute of Economics and Peace, which is a blue ribbon think tank of economists, have calculated that the annual peace dividend to the world would be $7.2 trillion per year. That's about 8.9% of global GDP. And there's an incremental benefit to reducing violence even a little bit. They calculated a 25% reduction in global violence would result in $1.85 trillion of economic benefit each year. What that shows externally is that a cooperative paradigm of managing our affairs, in which we put our greater goals our goals inside of greater goals, and we proactively collaborate and open ourselves to the influence of others and leave our egos at the door, is a far superior model for managing our affairs. We're seeing this paradigm emerge all over the place, where enlightened leadership looks like people figuring out what to do and then cooperating to do it, without waiting for anybody else, without waiting for governments, without delegating important authorities like how we handle conflict. We see an emergent paradigm of collaborative leadership leading mass cooperation. And there's organizations that are doing this all over the place. Now that you know to look for it, you'll find it. For instance, 4 years ago is one organization. They have over 3,000 collaborations for a big transitional goal. The Global Transition Initiative, and on and on and on. But to give you a picture of what the new world might look like as you go out and take this meme and start implementing it immediately in your own lives, you'll see something like, think spontaneous cooperative leadership groups emerging using crowdsourced information to package up global political power for virtual flash mobs. Think individuals empowered with information and tools to act better than most global leaders have today. Think the cost of global activism reduced to that of an online game, and the power of the voice of humanity itself being the transcendent political power on the earth today. Think of the old models of media that are replaced with your personal intelligence service that then feeds into a mobile dashboard of the issues and metrics that you care most about in the world. This is what I'm excited about.
We want you to look for the signs of this new cooperative paradigm and jump in. Because peace on the playground is also just learning how to cooperate, and you are each one of the playmates on the playground.
And remember,
peace
cooperates.